To begin the meeting. It's nice to see everyone. Welcome to the Vancouver School Board, located on the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. Today, we're really excited to be able to welcome two delegations to start us off. But before we jump into delegations and information items, discussion items, I would love to do a quick go around of introductions, just so we know who folks are. So maybe starting with what?
Rob Schindel, Associate Superintendent, School Services.
Janet Fraser, Trustee and Committee Member.
Estrelita Gonzalez, Trustee.
Hazel Pangilinan, Student Trustee.
Lois Chan-Pedley, Trustee.
Chaz Desjardins, District Vice Principal of Indigenous Education.
Jody Lengua, Associate Superintendent, Learning Services.
Selma Smith, District Principal, Learning Services.
Alan Wong, Trustee.
Carmen Cho, Trustee and Committee Member.
Barb Parrott, Trustee and Committee Member.
Thank you, and we'll just use the microphone here for the rest of the table.
Hello, I'm Swana. I'm the VDSC representative.
Amanda Hillis for DPAC, the District Parent Advisory Council.
Amy Wilman Vasa, did you hear me?
And just at the back here, starting with Adrian. Super. Thanks so much, everybody. So just a reminder that the meetings are live streamed, audio and video. So we ask that you use the microphone so folks online can also hear questions and dialogue. So without further delay, or one more delay, I'll just remind you that presentations are 10 minutes long, all presentations. So with the help of Rob, we'll just be ensuring that we're respecting of the folks coming after us. So if you could please keep to your time, and then we'll have moments for question and dialogue after as well. So I'd like to welcome the Point Grey Mini Leadership students. I've got Dane Liebens and Brandon Krzeski. Welcome.
Hi. Can you hear me? All right. So good evening, everyone. My name is Brandon Krzeski, and I am currently a grade 12 student at Point Grey Mini School. Now, to best explain my experience in the Mini so far and why it's been important to me, I'm going to start actually from back when I was in elementary school. Now, I wouldn't say my time in elementary school was necessarily bad. However, I was never really able to connect with my classmates, I felt, on a deeper level. And in general, I found none of my classes to be very interesting or inspiring. So when I was accepted into Point Grey Mini, a program whose mission statement is to provide an enriched education to well-rounded, academically minded students, I was extremely excited for the next 5 years. And now I can say with confidence that I was not disappointed. The Mini has had a profound impact on numerous aspects of my life, but I'll briefly list some of the highlights. Firstly, the program has influenced me from an academic standpoint. All of the teachers at Point Grey Mini are extremely dedicated to their students and passionate about what they teach, which as a student makes it easier to discover what you're passionate about. Before high school, I had always saw myself going into a career in science. However, after my experience in the humanities classes in the Mini School, in which we studied everything from To Kill a Mockingbird, my personal favorite, to the songs of the Tragically Hip, I found that I had also developed a passion for the arts. And as a result, next year, I plan on studying at McGill in the Faculty of Arts and Science, where I'll get the opportunity to explore both of my passions. If it wasn't for Mr. Hamilton, my teacher's humanities classes, I wouldn't be on the career path I'm on now. So secondly, as a community, the students of the Mini School have traditionally been heavily involved with Point Grey Secondary's Ultimate Frisbee program. And thus, in grade 8, I was coaxed into trying out for the team. And since then, I've fallen in love with the sport, and not only have I played for the past 5 years on the school's team, but I've also played and captained a local club team and gone to the Canadian Ultimate Championships twice. Recently, I've even gotten involved in coaching younger students at the Vancouver Ultimate League. However, if it wasn't for the Mini, I probably would have never even touched a Frisbee during my high school career. However, without a doubt, my time in the Mini has been best defined by the long-lasting friendships I've made along the way. My classmates are unique, hardworking, ambitious, and intelligent, and for me, being in a school space with like-minded individuals has been vital for my learning. Each day, they open my mind to new ideas and push me to achieve my best. On the flip side, because the Mini draws its students from a multitude of backgrounds and schools across Vancouver, we also appreciate each other's differences and are very accepting of one another. However, most importantly, the friends that I made are honest, kind, supportive individuals. And after spending almost every day of the past 5 years with them, I can say with a certainty that these people have become more than just my friends. They're my family. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dane Lebens. I am also in Point Grey Mini, currently in grade 12. So I'd like to start by talking about my journey coming into Point Grey Mini School. In elementary school, to be honest, I had never really considered mini school as an option for me. I went to a French immersion school, and since grade 2, all of my friends and I had basically decided we would be going to Churchill Secondary together. For the longest time, to me, Churchill was the only option. My older brother went there, my friends would go there, and I would carry on my French immersion studies there. However, on a whim, near the end of the 7th grade, I decided to apply for Point Grey Mini School, just to have it as another option. When I was accepted, I was hesitant about going to the mini school. I wanted the high school experience, a big school with sports games and spirit days, and ultimately I feared that I would miss out on these opportunities if I were in the mini school, and that I would be separated from the rest of the school. I didn't think I would fit into the role of a typical mini student. I did do very well in school, and I did love school, but I also love sports and social activities, and I didn't know to what extent I would be limited in those areas. And now, 5 years into the program, I can say with absolute confidence that I really had nothing to worry about. There is not a typical mini, and I have never before felt as if I belong somewhere as much as I do now in Point Grey Mini School. Nonetheless, I have also never felt a loss of connection to the main school, or felt that I was missing out on the advantages that the main school offered. Many students still have the same opportunities to participate in sports and social functions. Personally, for me, I am very involved in school sports, and I have played soccer and field hockey since grade 8. Through sports, I've connected with other students in the main school, and being able to represent my school through sports has really helped me feel part of Point Grey. Academically, the mini school was 100% the right choice for me. The environment at Point Grey Mini has pushed me to reach my full potential as a student. Every day, I'm surrounded by like-minded individuals with whom I get to collaborate and engage in stimulating conversations. There is an eagerness to learn and a desire to achieve your goals and aspirations, and I find the environment to be very motivating. Being surrounded by classmates who are academically driven makes learning easier and more enjoyable. And as a result, we are able to take an enriched approach to learning, sometimes reaching university-level projects and content. As a result, I feel prepared and excited for university coming out of the mini program. In university, there's no one holding your hand. You're responsible for managing all your time, and you have to go beyond just the basic concepts. Being in the mini school, thanks to the outstanding teaching staff, I've learned how to think critically and take my learning to a level that I would not be able to reach in another school or program. The mini school, which demands a heavier course load, has taught me how to prioritize my time, and which is another critical skill for university. What I love most about Point Grey Mini School are my 24 weird, unique, and absolutely brilliant classmates that I get to call my friends. I'm consistently amazed by the minds of my peers and their achievements, ranging from acceptances into prestigious universities and programs, sports achievements, receiving piloting certifications, being able to code a new program or fix a printer easily. These are only a handful of examples of why I'm so proud to be a part of a program that encourages well-roundedness and taking on new challenges that may not always be the norm, or in another setting might not be accepted or labeled as lame or nerdy. But in the mini school, our differences, our quirks, and our passions are celebrated. That is why the mini is important to me, because it is an environment where I can be myself. I don't have to pretend that I didn't do the homework or didn't study for the test. I don't have to keep my hand lowered when the teacher asks a question and I know the answer. I don't have to be ashamed of the fact that, yes, I do love school, because Point Grey Mini is a community, a home, a source of support for all students. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to open it up for questions, comments. Yeah, I've got Barb.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. I have a couple of questions, but don't worry if you can't answer them. You both mentioned the words like-minded. What do you mean by that? You said that they were the people at the school were like-minded individuals. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think what both of us were kind of getting at is that every day we're in sort of a setting where first of all, school matters. So like, let's say like we all have a test coming up the next day. Everyone's talking about that test. We're all like, and after that test, we're all discussing like maybe like what the answers were, what we thought they were, that sort of thing. So I feel like being in the mini is the sort of place where everyone, like, although we're different, we're alike in a way where everyone is focused on school and we're all focused on achieving our best in pretty much all aspects. So yeah.
Thank you. And you said that you didn't think you were a typical mini student. What did you think a typical mini student was, and how are you different than that?
So I always pictured a typical mini student, which now I've come to believe that isn't really a thing, but to be solely focused on school, always studying, always preparing for tests, no social life, but coming to meet the 150 kids that are in the mini school, I can say that there is a wide range of students who do different activities, extracurriculars, volunteering, all of that. So yeah, to me, honestly, there isn't really a certain type of student that is a mini student, really. It can be anyone.
Hazel?
Hi. I would just like to thank you guys for coming in and giving such a detailed report on your mini school program. Me personally, I was a part of my mini school program at Gladstone, so I definitely know the stresses and the joys that comes with it. But I would just like to ask you guys, since you guys didn't think yourselves to be those typical students, do you think really anybody could be a part of the mini school program, or do you have to fit a certain criteria academically or otherwise?
Well, like any program in which you have to apply, there's certain I guess not necessarily credentials, but certain boxes that like you kind of have to tick. So like one thing that we mentioned, like you have to care about school. Like the mini is definitely not a program for people who are willing to just kind of float through high school and not really pay attention in class. It's for engaged students who like learning, who like coming to school. That's definitely one thing. Another thing that the mini values a lot is, like Dane said, the extracurriculars. So pretty much I know all of my classmates are involved like outside of the school. Like they do different volunteer work. We play on all the sports teams at school. The mini is very highly represented. The band program as well at Point Grey. And I think the mini school, it's the place for a student who wants to be involved, who wants to like kind of like test the waters, see what they can do, sort of thing, like in all aspects, not just necessarily academically, but also in music, arts, theater, you name it. The mini school is probably involved in it.
Thanks. Thank you both so much for coming here to present and take your time out of your evening to share your experience. I had one question around what opportunities you have to engage with students that maybe aren't in your mini program.
So now, especially that we are in more senior grades, we do have classes with the main school. So we have core courses such as English and mini leadership that we are required to take. So as you get older, you do have, so we'll have our sciences, our math courses with the rest of the school. but in grade 8, at grade 8 as well, you do have, I took drama and art and home ec with the main school. Brandon took band, all his band courses are with the main school. So as you get older, you do have more courses with the other students. As well, as we mentioned, there are lots of opportunities to play on sports teams. There are drama programs, fine arts programs, all of that is open to everyone, and clubs as well. So there is a lot, usually a good connection between the two schools. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks so much for the details. So without final questions, then I will say thank you and invite our next delegation. Thank you both. So I'd love to welcome up Hupe Elementary, Lix Lopez and Carrie Guelick. Great.
Do I have to press this button? No? Liloni was just going to do a land acknowledgement. Where's the best place for her to stand?
Wherever, Lenoli?
Wherever?
Leoni? Leilani, thank you. I just wanted to make sure. So Leilani, wherever you're comfortable. You can come up. Do we want to pause the video? Great. Okay. When you're ready.
Before I start, I'm just gonna say that I'm really shy. Youts, prizes Exuquet, Osinuga, Gakelin, Samotie. Sorry, I forgot. Jennifer Wilson, do Ernie Wilson, yeah. My traditional name is Kaisla's Eagle. I am Kaisla Nation. My parents are Jennifer and Ernie Wilson, and I am 12. I'd like to acknowledge the territories of the Amish, Musqueam, the Salish people. Okay. My first year going to Hakpe Elementary. I really like it. Out of all my elementary years, it's been my favorite school, and I've been to 3 different schools. It's nice to say that I'm in a school full of Indigenous people. At my old school, there was about 6 Indigenous kids all together out of 600. So we would have a worker, and then this year it feels like the original support workers are much, and it's that. I feel more connected to my culture. Yeah, there's just a lot of great.
Thank you so much for sharing and also for your wonderful territorial acknowledgement. Thanks.
Jihondakia. Hello? Jihondakia. Matsach on am. Ton trikbin kapyol ti tkala un banto khashnaks pay. Good evening. Thank you for giving us this time to come and talk a little bit about Pay Elementary School. My name is Lish Lopez. I'm a Maya, and I have a grandson who is a Blackfoot attending Pay School in grade 2. What we would like to present to you briefly, we don't have much time, is about what the school has been able to accomplish in this 8 years since it was created, and what are some of the challenges. So, through a short video and some pictures. At the end, I will make some last remarks. As we know, Vancouver is the third city in Canada with the largest Indigenous population. So it is very important for us.
You can start the video again.
Is Pay. The name of this school is Pay.
Smith Wayu, Gigata Daho Platku, Vancouver to Otsagu, Kispagwada de Bideku, Toyatitum, Masquium, Squamish, Slaeotu, Toyatitum, Lugra Am now is Needsum. Lugra Am now is Needsum. The language I just spoken is Somalia from the Tsimshian people of northern British Columbia. I said that my name is Crystal Smith, that I'm from Gigat, and that I live now in what is colonially known as Vancouver. I thanked the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh people for allowing us to be here on their unceded territory. I'm here standing in front of Khekpe Elementary, which is the school that my children, Ruby and Raven, go to. My daughter is in grade 3 and my son is in kindergarten. And I just think that the school is very unique and special in the fact that it's Indigenous focus, and not only does it teach Indigenous knowledges, but it also lives Indigenous knowledges.
So this is a book about cedar tree and all of its uses, and it's from the Musqueam Nation, so we have got some good info in there for us. Isabella, can you give some So when we're done this, the reason why we're starting with the story today is we get a little bit of understanding about why cedar is so important for the people here, the Indigenous people that live in this area. We planted a cedar tree, you might notice at the top of that right now. And when we're done here with the story, we're all going to go outside and be a part of planting that tree, so putting some dirt into the soil, and we're also all going to be a part of taking care of that tree. So we all have a responsibility. So we all have a responsibility to care for it, to care for our younger children or for smaller animals, because it's just a baby, it's still growing, so we have to be really careful. Because remember, that's one of our medicine trees, that's one of our healing trees. And it's really important that we all share the responsibility of care.
We'll stop the video there. I'm just going to go through some slides from this past school year quickly, so there's some time for closing remarks. So the first slide. So the children learn about the salmon life cycle, and there's an ant farm there. Do I point somewhere? Yes. Learning to make drums, learning about identity and belonging. Ice skating and hot chocolate with the kids. Learning to make grilled cheese sandwiches. This is a program where Gina, who used to run the meal program, she comes in and teaches the kids how to make fruit salad, pizza, grilled cheese. Lacrosse, our own Grizzlies, learning about lacrosse. This was Hobier, where the kids celebrate the Niska New Year. Learning about growing and planting, having an elder come into the classroom, theater. This was a fantastic assembly. It was Pink Shirt Day, but everyone learned about the 7 sacred teachings, and in particular about respect. This is our senior class learning about land and water. Yeah, so about stewardship of lands and waters. This was robotics. It's showing their robots. This is our Nicole, our Indigenous cultural worker. She's sewing with the students. Wish we had some pictures of the boys, because the boys got really into this, because we got a donation of Indigenous dolls. They're beautiful. And then kids, the senior class, going and filming on a field trip at the Roundhouse. And this was a field trip to the Culch, something called Nanabush, that was a big hit. And we'll just close with this final slide. In 2015, the school was going to be closed, and due to the advocacy from the Parents Advisory Council, they ensured that the school would stay open for a limited time period until 2020.
This year, it's very important. It's the first group of students that is graduating who started from kindergarten. So it is very important. And you are invited to come to that ceremony. Well, there has been lots of things that have been accomplished since 2011. And there are still many challenges that every school has. But we as parents or grandparents are very concerned about what is going to happen after 2020. We hope that the school will grow, will continue to provide education with a cultural and land-based education perspective to Indigenous and non-Indigenous children. For that to happen, reconciliation, it's very important. And we believe that the school has an important role to play in reconciliation. So there's need to promote the school, and there's need to know and to implement the recommendations from the school review. We cannot wait until next year or after next year. I think it's important to take action now. And for us, culturally, it's very important to have a principal and a vice principal are Indigenous peoples, because culturally for us is very important. And I think that will be true reconciliation for Indigenous peoples. Thank you very much. Chihontri.
Hi. Sorry. Kisuk Tilsmiet, Hukaklik Michelle Buckman. I'm also a parent at Hakpe Elementary, where my children have been attending for the last 6 years. I would like to acknowledge the traditional territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam First Nations. And I would also like to acknowledge that Indigenous parents are not recognized as a formal stakeholder at VSB committee meetings, although I am happy to see Amanda. So I just kind of wanted to mention this is a student learning and well-being committee, and there is a lot of pressure to stay on top of everything that is happening in the school district with regard to Hakpe Elementary. There's been a lot of information, things, events, agendas to keep track of over the last 6 years, and it gets tiring. It gets heavy. Even like if you miss something, then the weight of that can kind of hang over your head a little bit. Maybe you didn't read the long-term facilities plan until, like a little bit later in the year, and then recognize at that point that ACPE was discussed in the section around choice programs and combining those programs, but there was no discussion of a new build for Akpe Elementary as action to demonstrate reconciliation. I frankly, as a parent, I get a little tired hearing the discourse and the rhetoric of reconciliation. We've been at the school for 6 years. We want to see action. I feel like there's a lot of things that could be said on this topic. I'm happy to see that there's going to be a presentation coming up next with Chaz, and I can't remember the other person. And I'm glad that this copy of the presentation is in this agenda. I was looking over the current initiatives and programming. I don't see an Indigenous choice school listed as some of the current initiatives and programming. It's mentioned as some school that has an Indigenous name in a list with other schools, which is a little disappointing. So I have rhetorical questions to the school district, to you that are here. I know that you won't answer questions, but what actions are you taking to demonstrate reconciliation around Akpe?
Thank you. Thanks so much. So we have 5 minutes for question and answer to the committee. And I just wanted to acknowledge Leilani, thank you for overcoming your shyness to be with us today. I appreciate it, and I've been there. So thank you so much. So opening up for questions. And just to be clear, questions will come from the committee members as opposed to the gallery. Thank you. I've got Trustee Parrott.
Thank you all. I'm thinking in the future about an Indigenous high school, and I'm wondering what you would think of that idea.
This was mentioned in the community consultations that work that went into talking about establishing an Indigenous focus school in the first place. And we would welcome any steps taken towards building and establishing a Center for Excellence in Indigenous public education.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Trustee Fraser?
Thank you for coming out to share so much information about your school, and particularly seeing the videos of the students was very moving. And I have been to the school for a number of occasions, and I saw the renaming ceremony was part of the video there. I think we are spending a lot of time thinking about our consultations and our reaching out with the community, now working with our school communities. And I appreciate your point that there's a lot of information coming forward. I think that's partly for the desire of the board boards at the time to move things forward in the district and to get input from the school communities and the community at large. But I think from what I'm hearing tonight, we have some more work to do to improve that, so that we are making the touch points that really have the right impact and that are appreciated and understood by the communities we're trying to connect with. So thank you for bringing your perspective to the board and giving us the opportunity to hear directly.
So thank you so much. I have one kind of clarification and a question. So one is around, I can hear clearly that one thing you're looking for is like a plan in terms of what's next for your school and your school community. So just want to make sure that that's what you're stating. But also, if it's possible to elaborate a little bit on like maybe a highlight of what is something you'd like to see for the future of your school. Like what are some concepts that you have, or one concept?
An Indigenous principal. Thank you.
It's just the delegation here that can respond. So you could, yeah.
I mean, I will repeat
There you
it.
go. Thank you. So I'm going to have to wrap up question period because we have several other things on the agenda. If you want to quickly make your comment, that would be okay.
Well, I mean, this is the unfortunate part about not being recognized formally as a stakeholder in public education as a distinct Indigenous parent group.
Thank you. Got it. Thanks so much. Yep, Trustee Fraser.
So one point I'd like to clarify on our side, I know that the review is underway, but we haven't seen it yet as a board. So, we're not able to speak to those points yet. So
we were, as parents, we were told the review would be coming out at the end of March, and the recommendations would hopefully take place and be followed through for the next school year. Now we're being told we don't get to see it until the next school year. So that is a big question that we do have, and to find out what's happening there.
We heard the report was being vetted before it would be released to us at the school. So we naturally had some concerns about that.
So maybe I can respond and just say that we can have what I can ask of our staff is that we can communicate with the school community around that piece again.
Thank you so much for coming to the committee meeting. This is definitely an important conversation, and thank you for holding the bar up for that. Thank you. All right, so I'd like to jump into information items. So Chaz Desjardins, District Vice Principal, and Jody Lengua, Associate Superintendent. Mostly Chaz, on the topic of Indigenous education and reconciliation.
So good evening, everyone. I am a little bit nervous, so I'd like to introduce myself first. My name, if you don't know who I am, my name is Chaz Desjardins, District Vice Principal of Indigenous Education. I'm Nihio Métis on my father's side, Robert Edmond Desjardins, and I'm French, English, and Spanish on my mother's side, Diane Lorraine Johnson. I'm member to Cold Lake First Nations, and I'm a Treaty 6 Isku. My traditional territory is located in northern Alberta, so if you've been to Edmonton, you've been in my territory. I've lived here for the last 23 years on the unceded territory, working on Musqueam territory, living in Tsleil-Waututh territory. So I'd just like to talk this evening about our Indigenous education initiatives, as you can see up there. We are extremely busy given the redesigned curriculum and the push in of Indigenous knowledges and pedagogies into the education system. This slide just speaks to our department and currently how many students we have who have self-identified within the VSB. Our current numbers are 2159. Some of these numbers may not reflect what you have in the committee report. This is up-to-date numbers. Elementary, we have 1354. Secondary, 805. As you can see, our department there consists of a number of positions. We have Indigenous education workers, 26 of them, and they are spread out across the district. We have Indigenous education teachers, 8 positions, Indigenous education curriculum consultant, 1, Indigenous education cultural coordinator, 1 position, knowledge keeper position that is being held by Amanda White, who is from the Haida Nation, and then, of course, my position. So that is our Indigenous education family, and we are working across the district to ensure that the enhancement agreement is evident in all schools, but also we are making sure that our curriculum, we are the bridgers between bridging the curriculum in the school. So we are really busy but we love our work. Next slide. Just so if you read over the report, there are tons of initiatives that we have taken on this year, and I'm only going to speak to a few of them. This is the student well-being framework, and what I would like to make more evident in Indigenous education and across the district for every student is looking at the 5 R's, or there's actually 9 R's, but in this framework there are 5 that honor Indigenous philosophy of reciprocity, responsibility, relevance, and respect. And within the heart of the circle, you have the Enhancement Agreement, which fosters belonging, culture and community, and mastery. So essentially, this is what we're hoping to achieve for all of our students is, fostering their holistic well-being and not just their academic, intellectual well-being. And so this is something that we're going to be bringing to all the schools and the teachers. This is a lens for which educators can look through and begin to be guided by in the work that they do as educators and for administrators too. So I'm hoping this will become embedded in practice across the district. So this is just one of the first one. So we'll move to the next slide. Current initiatives. The presentation is broken down into current initiatives and programming. So these are a couple of the program initiatives or current initiatives that we have currently in place. The Enhancement Agreement has been in place since our second edition iteration has been in place since 2016 and goes till 2021. That is the foundation of our department's work and making that evident out and across the district to all educators and administrators about belonging, culture and community, and mastery, and all of those things need to be interconnected in order for our students to achieve their success. With that, we have brought our community together and we were selected by the ministry to become one of the equity scanning partners. Last year, they started with 6 districts. This year, they added an additional 13 districts, so Vancouver is a part of that. We're beginning to just have some initial conversations about what does equity mean in regards to graduation rates. And we know that for Indigenous learners, our rates are not on par with the provincial or national average. And so this equity framework is allowing us to have those challenging questions to look at what are the barriers to our Indigenous learners and how can we go about putting things into place as an entire system to lift up those graduation rates and creating environments where, you know, our students are going to graduate. So we're at, like I said, at the initial beginning of the work, and this will be ongoing for the next number of years. And so that requires us to meet and talk and have those challenging conversations. We have a number of stakeholder groups and community groups coming together to do that work. Next slide. A part of our work too is also strengthening our community partnerships, and in particular with the Musqueam Nation. We have, as a department, been developing and strengthening our relationship. We have done a lot of work with the language department, and we have been in contact with the education department. We also have the Dogwood 25 initiative, where we have been meeting with that group to look at ways to, again, to lift up the grad rates and get creative about providing more opportunities for our Indigenous learners. It's really, our department has multiple community partnerships that we continue to strengthen and build, and so Musqueam is a priority, but also we have our urban Indigenous community partners that we also are working alongside, and they're working alongside us as well. Next slide. These next two slides just speak to the First Peoples Festival, which many of your children may have attended in recent past. That's our 8th annual. This year was our 8th annual. Again, that partnership speaks to our relationship with the Museum of Anthropology, and we also rely on all our community partnerships with our local knowledge keepers, the artists from the communities that we have built relationships to, and they come to the museum, and it's a day of learning for all our students. We have a secondary day, we have an elementary day, and it has been a very successful opportunity for learning for all our students. So we just had our 8th annual secondary day this past week, and it went really well. And then we have the VSB Legacy Carving Project, which basically is founded on reconciliation and education. And this has been an engaging process for our learners across the district. We basically, this project was brought forth over a year ago, last March, and it's based on the vision of my work colleague, Davida Marsden, who received a vision well over 10 years ago. And the time was right to bring it forth. And she passed me tobacco and asked me, because that's our protocol as a Nihil woman and her as a Anishinaabe, to begin to think about how can we bring this to our district. And so we then went to our Associate Superintendent, Jody Lengua, and we talked about how can we do this. And so this is a joint partnership between the VSB and Indigenous education. It has been a lot of work here in the physical, on-site here, but also in the spiritual world as well. A lot has been taking place to ensure that this project is successful, and we will be unveiling our 3 poles on June 20th, and we will be inviting people to come and witness that work. The beauty of the project is that we've had hundreds of students come and have the ability to speak with the Squamish carvers who are carving here on site at the VSB. We also have a female welcome figure being carved at the Britannia Carving Shed, and we've had students go visit there. And we've actually had, we say 1 class per visit, but we've sometimes had 2 or 3 groups come and visit at the same time. So the kids have been able to hear about what the artists envision for reconciliation, and They've been able to share their input as to how they understand reconciliation. We have a number of art projects that are connected to this larger project. We have the Feathers project. The students received shavings from the reconciliation poll, and we developed some curriculum around that to support educators to begin to have those discussions with their students from K to 12 about what reconciliation and education means to them. And then we'll be displaying those feathers here at the Student Art Gallery in the month of June. So that's a major project that's going to cause a lot of, let's just say, good space for our local nation, Musqueam, because we're honoring with having 2 welcome figures, and then the reconciliation poll, which is for everyone, not just our Indigenous students, but the poll is for everyone. It's medicine for everyone. And those polls will be there for the next 150 years, cementing and decolonizing the grounds of the VSB, and that was the primary purpose of the project. Next slide. A part of that too, at school base level, many of our schools, most of them have school growth plans, and there is an Indigenous goal attached to the school growth plans. And what I've been encouraged to see, and what I've been seeing a lot in many of our schools, is there was a standard goal about raising awareness of Aboriginal history, culture, and language. And what I've seen across the district is that those schools in the early days when they adopted that goal was they've transformed, and now schools are looking at their sites specific as to what they want to do. And so they're adjusting that goal to meet the needs of their school community. So they're actually diving in deeper into what that actually means for their student population, their educators and administrators. So for me, I'm really happy about that. We also have the Indigenous in STEM. This is district, school, and community all interrelated. This program is being really in its beginning stages, and it's located at Britannia Secondary, but we have some science teachers who are making space within their Science 10 curricula to bring Indigenous STEM into their classrooms. So they're collaborating with Gearing Up out of UBC, as well as they brought in our knowledge keeper, and they're reaching out to Musqueam, and they're going to have a day next week where they're holding a day for their students to have more conversations about Indigenous STEM and what does that mean, and how they can continue to build the process. So that's really exciting. I'm really excited about that. We're also trying to connect with ACTUA, which is a national organization as well that does in STEM, and they provide some guidance around bringing that curriculum to school districts, and also organizing land-based camps which focus on in STEM too. So we're hoping to do some work around that with Musqueam as well. Next slide. And then we have Indigenous Foodscapes, and that is a partnership through the health organization, and our department curriculum consultant is taking the lead on working with Indigenous Foodscapes, and we have 9 gardens across the VSB in which they are creating some curriculum material in identifying the Indigenous plants and getting them labeled appropriately for the schools that are in partnership with that, and they're going to create some curriculum around that. They're developing that now, and it's really exciting to see that take place as well. And then, of course, we have drumming and singing. I know Akpe, the students there they do it. It's a part of their everyday. But drumming and singing has taken off across our district. I've been to other schools like Tyee, who awoke their drums last year. Queen Elizabeth Annex, they just completed 90 drums and they're going to have a ceremony to awaken their drums. So this is a part of, you know, providing opportunities for our young people to hear their voice and to sing their traditional songs. So it makes me happy that it's everywhere. And our Coast Salish anthem, our students are learning that song. And I know that, you know, lots of people across, you know, not just within our department, people in the schools are doing it. I know it's being done at Pay. We have, you know, non-Indigenous teachers also doing that work. So it's amazing to be able to have a drum and use it. And I know that young people, there's so much cultural pride attached to that. And also it's a part of your identity and who you are. But they're also teaching the drum protocols about carrying drum and the songs that you sing. So my hands are raised up to those people who are doing that work. It's really important work. And we'll move to the next slide. And really much of this work that we're doing, not just within my department, but across the district. A few years ago when Elder Shane Point was our elder for the district, and he's from the Musqueam Nation, he gifted us this teaching of Not Samat, we're one. And as our department, this has been our foundation for our work about bringing people together. Not Samat, we're one. It's hard work, but that's what we have to do. And so we're going to be continuing that work. Not Samat, we're one. And the last initiative you can see there is a book club, which was a collaborative partnership between myself and Selma Smith, who is the principal of social emotional learning. And we invited a number of administrators across the district to read this book here that you can see. It's called Consoling Our Schools by Jennifer Katz. And we've had some really good dialogue around how do we go about bringing this framework for, you know, mental health, well-being, and reconciliation into our schools. So we've been able to share, you know, what practices have worked. They shared with us what they feel is working, and so they've been able to hear each other and share their ideas, which is great. And this work is going to continue on because a lot of administrators are invested in fostering holistic well-being for all their students. And that will look differently across the district, but they're taking on many different initiatives in that regard. Next slide. And I just wanted to say thank you in my language. I'm not going to pronounce it right, but that's okay. I've learned you just have to say it. Gi Nanoskomitin. And I want to thank you for listening to me, and respect is actually listening what others people have to say. So thank you. Hi.
Thank you, District Vice Principal Chaz. So just opening up for questions, comments. Yeah, Darren.
Thank you. I'd just like to give some feedback to the staff and trustees. The Vancouver Elementary School teachers really appreciate the wide range of opportunities to support students and teachers. We value the support for staff and students, the insight, the sharing of knowledge, and connections to the community provided by the Indigenous Education Department. We value the wide range of opportunities outlined today for our students and teachers to integrate Indigenous philosophy, culture, and history into our classroom. All of this supports and facilitates the commitment of our members to implement the goals of the Aboriginal Enhancement Agreement. And finally, it's also important that schools are staffed beyond the minimum and resourced beyond the minimum to support the day-to-day educational experiences of our Indigenous students and to meet their needs as reflected in the goals of the Aboriginal Enhancement Agreement.
Trustee Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chaz. That was, I know you're doing tremendous work, you and your staff there, so thank you for the overview. I'm sure there's a lot more that you didn't even get to tonight. I have just two quick questions. One is in relation to the Reconciliation Center at UBC, which I learned about myself recently. And I'm wondering if there's any sort of where that fits in, collaboration or students going there. So it seems like a pretty important piece to right in our own backyard here.
I know there are some educators, such as a colleague of mine from Chilliwack, who is doing some work with the center at UBC. By all means, I encourage all educators to go out there and connect, to go and, you know, be a witness to the stories that are there. As for the curriculum, I don't know where they are. Mary Ellen Chappell, it is her, right? My mind is blank. Anyway, I've spoken to the director, and there's lots of curriculum being written right now. What our curriculum coordinator is doing work with UBC on residential schools, and so we have a number of initiatives. But I do encourage everybody to go up there and go and meet and connect.
My second question, it's in relation to the equity scanning tool. What is there an idea of the end date on that? I know it's a research project. Do we have an idea when it's going to wrap up?
I'd say there is no end date to equity until we reach parity with grad rates. So this is really just kind of looking at and scanning what we're doing, and so to see where we need to you know, what are the barriers, identify the barriers, but also acknowledge the strengths of what's going on right now. So it is a project that's probably going to take us a number of years, and we're looking at our own data and the data from the ministry, but also looking at, you know, from the ground up and the top down to bring everything together as a collective unit to, you know, we need to increase the grad rates for our Indigenous learners.
Thank you, Trustee Parrott.
Thank you. I have two questions. Chaz, thank you for the report. You mentioned Dogwood 25, and I suspect that the 25 is 2025, or is so? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
So we were invited to join Dogwood 25. They've been around for a number of years, and they're basically an organization that a number of influential people have come together to kind of support increasing the grad rates for Indigenous learners, but also providing opportunities for increased success. So we're just really consulting with them to see what works for our district. And we haven't really landed on anything, although we have some ideas of what we'd like to do. And they're there to use their influence and their connections. So we're still in the beginning phase of figuring out what that means for our department, for the district.
Thank you. And my second question is, when I taught at McDonald, we did some partnership with NITEP and had many student teachers at McDonald from the NITEP program. Does NITEP still exist, and do we do that kind of partnership anymore?
Yes, NITEP still exists, and they're still graduating teachers, and we are looking to continue to strengthen our relationship and see what we could do to build those connections between our district and NITEP. So we've met with Dr. Jan Hare, who I know very well, and we're looking to provide some opportunities for our students to gain early access into that program. So we're just still kind of in the discussion consultation phase, but we know lots of our educators who are currently in our system have gone through NITEP, and many have gone to become their teachers across BC. So it is a very successful program, and they just had their 40th anniversary. I think it was a couple of years ago.
So I've got myself, then Trustee Fraser, then Trustee Wong. So I just had two questions and then just one comment. So being a part of the Indigenous Education Committee, I've been able to meet that list of staff that you mentioned face to face, and there's so much passion in that room and a lot of difficult conversations that people are having with a lot of respect. So just want to outline that, and that's where the equity scan work is also taking place. So that's been really powerful for me as well. But my two questions, one was around how many, well, I can see from the delegation as well that the value of Indigenous staff is really important to an individual's learning. So I was curious if we have a number or an approximation of how many Indigenous identifying admin we might have, like as in principals or vice principals.
I only know them through relationship or connection to. I don't think we have the numbers of who self-identified as Indigenous, or we keep that data per se. I know that the BC PVPA is looking at, tracking that within their own organization, but I only know those who are administrators and who are Indigenous because I know them personally.
Thank you so much. And my second follow-up question to that was just, is the district principal an active search position, or there is no district principal because it just ended on district vice principal, your list of staffing?
Well, I am the district vice principal, so there is no district principal. So so my question is just, is there an active search? Is that a vacant position in the district, or maybe? There is no position. It's not vacant. I'm currently the vice principal of Indigenous education.
Thanks so much. So Trustee Fraser?
Okay, thank you. And I just had a time to reflect a little bit on the question. This is more a comment than a question, of why Huck Pay was not included in the initiatives report. And I think in my mind, it's because it's not an initiative, it's a fundamental part of what we're doing in our district. And the review that's undergoing is to enhance how we're providing those services at the school. And to go slightly on a tangent about the building and the location of the program, the Ministry of Education has been very prescriptive about the capital funding rules around capital funding. And the prioritizing of projects, but now there seems to have been there are new long-range facility plan guidelines that seem to open up more opportunities for districts about how we define our capacity, how we define use in our schools, how partnerships with the community and with other organizations are valued. So one of the things we're doing in the district is looking at how those guidelines could impact our long-range facilities planning, and that might be an opportunity to look at the buildings that we can offer, the facilities that we have in a slightly different light. So I'm hopeful that we can, as a district, take more control of how we put forward projects to the Ministry of Education.
Thank you. Trustee Wong?
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Chaz. You answered the question Trustee Parrott asked with regards to the NITEP program. I went through the MTEP program, which is a sister program to the NITEP, and we're saying in the final stages of consultation with UBC with regards to the NITEP program, and hoping some of our students will graduate and move into the UBC program. Is there, from the consultation process, then planning on something more formal with regards to connecting our students to the UBC? Then I have a follow-up.
In specifically to the NITEP, yes, that's what our wish is. We're not there yet, but that's our goal.
Thank you. That's good to hear. Secondly to that, not specifically about NITEP, but I've heard in the past there we had a program, and I'm not sure if we still have that. There was a program, a math program, where students in the summertime, I believe it was in the summertime, Indigenous students, there was a collaboration with UBC with regards to a math program. So I'm thinking of those types of programs, if not specifically that type of program. I'm not sure if you can comment on something like that tonight.
We do have those programs available to our students, and we share out. I receive that communication from UBC. They have PIMS. So our students do have an opportunity to take math learning in the summertime. We also are connected to NEC, which is the Eagles of Tomorrow, a math program where students can attend as well and receive math credits if they attend the program, and I believe it's a 6-week, and we've had students go through that program and be very successful. And yeah, so we do, there are tons of opportunities in that regard. There's science programs, there's math, engineering, and we share it out to our schools, and our teachers and enhancement workers help support in getting our students to that programming.
Thank you. We've got one final question from Amanda Hillis.
Hi, I've actually got a couple questions. First one is, do we have an idea about the number of teachers who self-identify and how many Indigenous learners are being taught by Indigenous teachers?
I don't believe we have the number of Indigenous teachers. We have Indigenous teachers in our district. I can tell you through my department with our Indigenous education teachers, you know, who has been teaching us alongside teachers, and then we can drill down that data. I don't have it to give it to you this evening, but that can be done. Within the district itself, I don't have an idea of how many other Indigenous educators there are beyond my department.
Thank you. And the second one, I'm very happy to hear you're working with the language department. Are there any ideas of when we will be able to get Indigenous languages into the school, or if there's a way to get hiring local Indigenous language teachers?
We have been working with the language department, primarily with Jill and Vanessa Campbell and Elder Larry Grant. And again, we're still in the beginning phases. I know that some schools are bringing Indigenous languages into their schools, like Hakpe. I know that they have their programming. And I would love to have Indigenous languages in our schools more formally. So that will take more visioning, and that will take continuing to strengthen our relationship with Musqueam. We need to have fluent speakers be able to, and I know they have a lot of members of their community are taking Hunkaminam language courses. So this is something I know has not only been my dream, but the dream of a few of our department members, and I know that people are doing that work currently in their schools. So the language is coming into the classrooms, and I know that a lot of that work has been done by Indigenous educators themselves or non-Indigenous educators who are doing that work. So I'm very grateful that they're taking on that work, but we do need to get a little bit more strategy-wise and be a little bit more systemic in our approach. But again, we need to make sure that we have a strong relationship with Musqueam and their language department before we can do a more kind of a system approach. But I'm all in favor of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Chaz. So our next presentation is going to be with Jody Lengua, Associate Superintendent, presenting on music programs.
Thank you. This report is a follow-up to information provided at the February 2019 Student Learning and Wellbeing Committee. In February, an overview of a survey distributed to elementary schools was provided, and the survey purpose was to seek out information from elementary schools in regarding to program opportunities available for students. So after that presentation in February, we said that once we'd had time to analyze the data, we'd bring it back to this committee. And so that's what I am doing this evening. So to begin with, the survey results were very positive. We had 81 out of 89 schools respond. That's a 91% return rate, which is pretty incredible. There were some very interesting things that we learned through the survey. Probably one of the biggest things that struck me was that 47 of the responding schools, or 58%, indicated that they do have a music specialist on staff. So over half of our schools, elementary schools, have a music specialist on staff. 41 of the responding schools reported that music is offered for 1 period per week, and 40 of the responding schools reported that music instruction is offered for more than 1 period per week. So that first slide tells us that we do have a significant number of music specialists on staff and that there is music offered in all of the responding schools there in some form. If we drill down into some of the questions, and these were things that we have heard people asking questions about, so that's why we put them into the survey. So the survey question says, does a music specialist teach on a prep coverage model? So 75% of the schools that responded said yes, they do teach on a prep coverage model, and 25% said no, they don't. That gives us an indication of how some music is being taught in schools. Another survey question was, do you offer a band program taught by a VSB teacher? So that's just a band program. I just want to highlight that, not band and strings. We're just talking about band right now. And so 8 said, the raw number of 8 or 9% said yes, and 91% said no. Then we asked the same question, but pertaining to a strings program taught by a VSB teacher. There we had 7% say yes and 93% say no. That gives us an indication of who's teaching in the schools as teachers, as VSB teachers. The next question that was asked is any music instruction at your school PAC sponsored? That was in response to questions around how people were paying for these programs. And so what we saw there was 21% of the respondents said that they did have PAC sponsored music instruction in their schools. And then we drilled down a little farther to that question by saying if the answer was yes, which music area is sponsored by PAC? And so we had 21% say band was sponsored by PAC. We had 18% say strings was sponsored by PAC. And we had 61% say choir was sponsored by PAC. Another question that we looked into was, is any music instruction at your school community sponsored? And there we saw that 30% of the programs were a band were sponsored by the community, and that 70% of the choir programs were sponsored by the community. And that is the sum of the survey without going through every single point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jody. So opening up for questions, I've got Trustee Perry.
Thanks, Jody. Is this a elementary and a secondary survey?
No, it was elementary.
Just elementary.
Only.
Oh, that's good to know. On the slides that talk about community and PAC sponsored instruction, do you know what's meant by that? Is it during the school day, or is it after school choir programs, or?
We didn't ask for that kind of information, so we don't have that to disaggregate.
Okay. I've got Darren, then Trustee Chan.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that 25% who responded no, would that include classroom teachers who are just doing music in their classroom, sort of integrated into their teaching, or might teach recorder in their own class? Or is that not what you were referring to about music specialists?
It would have been somebody with a specialty in music.
Thank you. So I've got Trustee Chan Pedley.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify something. For example, at my kids' school, they have a volunteer teacher come in for some amount of time. I'm not sure how much. Does that count as having a music specialist on staff, or is that
That would not be
counted?
included as on staff if they're volunteer, no.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I've got Trustee Gonzalez.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a quick question then on the music specialist. So how is that determined if a school has a music specialist? Is it administration? Is it sort of, I'm just kind of curious of the process of how some have and some don't, and how do you get one?
Music specialists would be those people with the qualifications in their training in order for them to be counted as a music specialist.
So just to follow up, so meaning that was just, did that school specifically ask for somebody that was a music specialist to be hired there, or is it just like, do you know what I'm saying? So some have and some don't. I'm just kind of curious why that is. Yeah, and it sort of goes to the question of where we value, music education and the equity piece that we talk a lot about. I'm just kind of curious what the determination is. Is a school just lucky that they happen to have one? And because the administrators decided that's what they want to spend some of their budget on. I'm just curious of the process.
A school would determine that they had need for a music specialist and a desire for a music specialist, and they would post a position for that. And if they were able to find a music specialist, that person would be put into the job posting.
So as a follow-up to that, would that mean that there are schools still looking for music specialists? Like, I imagine it's probably not easy to always find a music specialist, but could it be that we are actively looking still for schools for music specialists?
I don't know what postings have been put out that were left unfilled. I can get that information from you through our HR department.
Thanks. I have one question and then I'll come back to Darren. Sorry, two questions. One was around like the goal for music delivery. So you mentioned half of the programs are in half of the elementary schools. So is that an adequate goal, or is there something that we want 100% coverage or 80?
Sorry, which part of were you wondering about?
Yes, so if half of our elementary schools have music staff specialists, what would be our goal for adequate music programming in elementary schools?
I don't have that number, but I can get it for you.
And I just had a second follow-up question. Do the drumming and singing that we had referred to earlier in the first staff presentation, does that show up in music programming, or do we consider those separately?
Drumming and music would fall under the music program as part of the curriculum, because music is part of the curriculum, right? So music can be taught in many different ways to satisfy the curriculum requirements.
Thank you. I've got Darren.
Just to follow up on my earlier question. I think there are many classroom teachers who teach music as an integrated way in elementary school in their classrooms. So they might do singing, learn musical instruments, learn how to read music, and that might not be reflected in this survey. It doesn't sound like it is, because we see ourselves as elementary generalists and trained to teach all the subjects. So that's probably not reflected in here, those kinds of activities that occur in the classrooms.
Okay, thanks so much. Thank you so much, Jody. Really appreciate your presentation. So next up, we have Selma Smith, District Principal, presenting on Diversity Initiatives Update.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me tonight. It's a pleasure to share with you an update on some of the different anti-racism and diversity initiatives that are happening currently in our district. Do we have the clicker, Chaz, or it doesn't work? Okay. Thanks, Greg. So just to, as I begin the presentation here, just to let everyone know that the work that we're doing around anti-racism and diversity is reflected in our strategic plan, as you can see by the goals and objectives that are mentioned there. Okay. Yeah, sorry, wrong. Keep going, keep going. Thank you. So I'll talk about this one. So I'm going to share with you tonight just an overview of the different anti-racism education initiatives that we had that are reflected in our staffing, resources, and the programming that we provide in our district. We're very committed to ensure that we have resources available to our students, our staff, and their families. And the one way that we really work to try to achieve what we have is through the work of our district diversity advisory committee. So we have stakeholder representatives on the committee as well as community partners who really bring forward emerging issues, trends. We review materials and create materials for our district. So it's a very busy group that really accomplishes a lot of work. And I know we've been very busy this year creating some new and updated resources for the district. I'm going to, next slide, please. Next one. Thank you. So I'm just going to mention to start off the work of our district resource teacher for diversity. So we're very fortunate to have a teacher in the role that's taking the lead in our district to create resources collaboratively with other staff in the district as well as community partners. And our district resource teacher takes that lead and really provides opportunities in schools to work collaboratively by invitation by schools to provide workshops or to co-teach with teachers as well as provide presentations. The person's accessible to families and students as well. Okay, then I'll just keep going. Perhaps with the, while Greg changes the PowerPoint, maybe we could just stick to the report that you all have in your agendas. Thank you. So in terms of the staffing, I was mentioning we have a staff person, but we also have are working towards really improving more of a systemic approach and to having resources available to the district. And that's something that I would say we are continuously reviewing and looking at how we can improve that. We are a large urban school district and want to improve access to materials, resources, and we're really trying to focus through education and training, providing resources, and then coming up with some district initiatives where we have community and stakeholders and youth and families working together to based on emerging trends, but also responding to where we need to do this work. But we're also we don't want to be just responsive or reactive. We want to be preventative and provide as much education and learning for our students, families, and staff. So it's work that's needed to be done and continues to be done. And I really feel, you know, that we are doing that collaboratively with as many as possible. So I just want to highlight some of the different different types of programs that we have. I've listed them here in the report just for your information. We currently include the Beyond the Hurt is a program by the Red Cross that's available for grades 6 to 12. And that really, the program there has been well received in our schools. It really focuses on bullying and discrimination and looking at human rights. So that's available for our schools. We also have a program that we support. It's called Choose Your Voice, which looks at how youth can take on looking at exclusion and the history where there has been exclusion and in present day as well. So that's available there. We also have a community partnership with Access to Media, and they have a program called Displacement, and they work with a lot of our schools to create films that have been created by immigrant youth, youth that have been born here, Indigenous youth, and they've created videos that they've shared within their school community, as well as feeder schools. And the projects that some of our schools have created, they're very grassroots, and the youth come up with issues that are current for them, and they are facilitated by our staff as well as staff from the displacement organization. We recently held a training. If you have not heard of ECATAS, I've put the link in here, and they have a fabulous program called Play It Fair. And we recently held a training for staff, and we actually invited folks from other parts of the Lower Mainland or whoever can come and attend the training. So we try to be as inclusive as possible. If there are opportunities for other staff who would like to be part of this, we have done that. We also really promote a program that was created by BCTF called Show Racism the Red Card. It's a well-created resource that's available for our schools, and I know that it is being utilized. And Speaking Rights is another one that ECATAS has a program that has been designed to help youth explore some of the issues around human rights. And I know some of our secondary schools have been, it's been a popular program for kids in our high schools, especially, to really look at diversity, social justice, and inclusion. So some of the I was talking about some of the community partners and some of the resources that have been created. Currently, we're looking at having an anti-racism school lead in each school. We've had this model in the past, and we I think see a need to have it reestablished. So that's something that we're looking at how to have that come about again for next year. And I know the team's working on having a school lead at each school, with our district resource teacher being the district lead to disseminate information, but also provide training and build community amongst the different school leads. We also have a district diversity toolkit, which is available to all of our staff. We have resources on there that are available around events, curriculum, initiatives around SOGI as well, that's on there. And we have a lot of our staff or teachers as well too will share resources that they've either created or collaborated on, and then they pass along to our district resource teacher, and it's shared. It's not just one way of material that's given to the district, but I know a lot of our teachers have been sharing with us the great things that they're doing, and we're trying to promote and expand and share the great work that's being done in our schools. We have, I know, a committee of staff and community folks have created a new resources called Addressing Racism, Hate, Discrimination, and Bias in Schools, and it's a brochure meant for school community members to help how to respond and support when any type of racism, hate, or discrimination may surface. And so we've worked on creating that resource, and it's available on the toolkit. And we're very fortunate again to have members of the Indigenous Education Department. I know VESTA, VSTA, the admin, Vet Fund, BASA, and the community partners have all together created these resources and provided input. So very fortunate to be working with all of our community partners. We really also value the ongoing engagement with community. So we currently work with ECATAS, the Access to Media. The Vancouver Parks Board has been very supportive and working collaboratively with us, the BCTF as well too. So we're very fortunate to have valued members of different community partners to be working with us. I'm going to touch on some district initiatives. We have an equity program that was launched this year at Van Tech Secondary and John Oliver, and the program has begun really more of an intersectional approach. It's great, Chaz, that you're here tonight because a lot of this work is not being done just in one department. When we're talking about diversity and anti-racism, we are reaching out and working with our colleagues in different departments. So Indigenous education has been part of the work that we're doing here. And it's been really, I think, great to have that intersectional approach to really prevent racism and any type of discrimination happening in our school or in our community. Next slide. Oh, I think there isn't another slide. I just want to add one more thing. So we've also are currently have a draft of a handbook that's going to be available for staff and for students. We heard from students, especially this year. We do have youth representative on our district diversity committee, and it was the youth on the committee that said to us, "Where are my resources?" So we responded to that by creating resources for youth around addressing racism and where they can go for support. So that's new for us as well too, creating those materials. And we're also, like I mentioned, creating a handbook around anti-racism for staff as well too. And that's still in draft form and being worked through the Diversity Advisory Committee. So I think that concludes my report, and happy to answer questions.
Cool. Thank you so much, Selma. So opening up for questions from the committee. Trustee Parrott.
Thank you. Thanks for your report. Do you think that the diversity committee sees a difference between diversity and anti-racism education?
I would say that the committee very much looks at it as an intersectional approach. Like we have a variety of diverse group of representatives on the committee, as well as community partners, and the energy and the feel for this group is to share, collaborate, and not be working in silos. And you know, the marginalization and discrimination that can happen for anybody, whether it's race, gender, or sexual orientation, or other forms, is discussed and looked at in this committee. So it's not seen as separate. It's there's opportunity for voice to come forward in that committee.
Do you know if there's any research that talks about the best way to look at these issues? Is it the way you're describing it, or is it I don't know, or is it to separate the diversity, which is all working together, and the anti-racism, which is really focusing on things that are happening that shouldn't be happening, whereas I see diversity as working together on things that should be, you know, the goodness about everybody working together, whereas anti-racism just is focusing really specifically on behavior and trying to stop that behavior.
So I can definitely answer that question there. So we have some researchers from UBC on the committee and who work in departments around equity and social justice. And we did do some research around this a couple years ago and explored it, and were informed and realized that best practice is to work in an intersectional approach, not in a silo. And because of having a partnership there with UBC especially, we as a district a couple years ago made the committee broader, but ensured that there's as many voices at the table when it comes to different types of diversity. And I know diversity, it's a positive term. I hope it's something we celebrate, but there is a lot of recognition amongst the group around where there has been prejudice or bias, and in any form.
I've got Trustee Wong and myself.
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you, Selma, for the presentation. Particularly appreciative of the summary of the district support staffing and the over the last couple of years, and how there has been an increase in that role. very appreciative of the resources, programming, and other supports, especially point 3 of bringing online the district diversity toolkit that's available, and particularly how it connects the 4 areas, racism, events, Indigenous education, and SOGI. I believe there is a SOGI connection in every school at this stage. And that's good to hear. And there's the rollout of the anti-racism lead in each school as well. Just a question with regards to the possibility or the thoughts of having some resources within the toolkit being translated into various languages, particularly I'm thinking with regards to SOGI and a number of different communities. And I'm thinking it, no need to respond to this one, with regards to a connection with coastal health. Okay. So specifically the translation with regards to SOGI and parents and for students to be able to use those resources to the parents.
I'm just going to look up on our district website, but I'm sure we have it up there. We actually were quite fortunate a couple years ago to receive a grant through the ARC Foundation, specifically creating resources for families around diversity and gender diversity and children and youth. And we actually translated the materials into 6 different languages, and they're available on the district website under safe and inclusive practices. We have a section there for parent resources. So though that material is there, we recognize that we also want to work towards having materials around anti-racism support and response translated as well. So our department's working with our multicultural workers to see if they can support some of this work, but we recognize it is a lot of work, so there may have to be support that we gain from community, such as Mosaic and such. They are on our committee, but that's in the works in terms of translating our anti-racism resources, but SOGI resources have been translated.
Yeah, one more follow-up. We were talking about, you were talking about intersectionality of within the committee. A question with regards to bringing information or a connection with regards to the Indigenous community, either internally within our groups or our advisory committee, and or with external organizations from the Indigenous community. It's just an interest to build up that portion of anti-racism with regards to the Indigenous community. Any thoughts with regards to within and externally, specifically with the Indigenous community?
And Chaz is here too, so she might be able to help me respond. But I know that we've the last 6 months, we've been offering between staff, I know in your department and in mine, working collaboratively to offer workshops to staff in our district around looking at diversity, racism, prejudice through an Indigenous lens. That's actually it's been on our Pro-D site, and we actually have staff that have been working collaboratively together on that. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So I've got a question. First, a comment around the distinction between diversity and intersectionality. So my area of work is in intersectionality. So I think it's important to recognize that intersectionality is about multiple intersecting identities that add to a person's experience with oppression. So it's very distinctly different from diversity or other categories, because it would implicate things like gender on top of race, sex, class, sexual orientation, age, and things like that, as we're discussing now. And so I guess what that results in is how people's experience is then impacted by those intersectional identities, which may be positively, but in specific with intersectionality, negatively affected in terms of their access to systems. So what I think is important for this conversation is making a clear distinction between the difference that we see in diversity and anti-racism, and the distinction, the importance of the distinction being that it makes it easier for students to access those services and support. So when I worked in the district, I know we often went for anti-racism resources. How do I deal with X, Y, and Z issue? And so the ease within which young people can access those services would really show up in terms of how we title them and name them and that kind of thing. So just to say that the definitions do really make a difference, especially when you're dealing with folks who maybe aren't literate in English, or are young people, like elementary age and that kind of thing. We talked about that at a different committee meeting. So just making that distinction, I think, would be a very strong recommendation from myself to be able to navigate the resources with ease. I've got a couple questions. One was just around what the sort of plans for evaluating the brochure will be. So as it lands in the hands of children and youth in our school district and staff, what will sort of the monitoring evaluation plan look like for it?
So thank you for your feedback and your comments, much appreciated. In terms of when we create materials or resources, a lot of thought and care does go into before we mass release an item like this. So we have youth on the committee. The staff that are part of the committee have been working with their students, sort of piloting, testing things out with different age groups and getting feedback as well. We have, I know, District PAC is on our committee as well too, that also provides input. So we certainly, I would say it's not a formal research project, but we gather information from our community, and these are resources that certainly can be updated, added to. We're very sensitive in terms of what we're putting on there. We never want to offend anybody or upset, so we really listen to the folks who are giving the input on that, and as many eyes that can try to see it and give the feedback before it gets released. But some of it's in draft still, so we're in that stage of reviewing it still.
Thank you. And if you could just elaborate a little bit on what the collaborative process looked like for that planning and design process.
So we have the Diversity Advisory Committee, and from that committee, working groups have formed on several different projects. So the last couple of years, with the question that you're asking about the specific resource. So I know that teachers have been part of the working group there. We've had some community experts, partners as well, that have been providing some guidance. And that working group has been working with their own school communities, and then they bring it back to the diversity committee where it's discussed and reviewed, and the decisions are made as a group how to proceed.
Sorry, just one more clarifying question. So you mentioned children and youth. So like, how would they come into that process? Is it after the delivery, or are they a part of the design process as well?
We have a couple of high school youth represented on the committee, but the staff that are part of the committee, and we have school leads in different schools, in all the schools, and so it's done more collaboratively with, I would say, teacher to teacher, staff to staff, where it's shared with either their class and such, and then brought back.
Thanks so much. Thank you. So on my list here, I've got Amanda.
Hi. From a parent point of view, so we get reports from parents talking about their kids being bullied and stuff like that. What would be the best contact? I see in your brochure, it mentions both the district resource teacher, having the direct email address that's written right here, or going to the school admin team.
Is your question about a bullying incident or around a racism or discrimination?
Well, we get a lot of parents talking about all sorts of different issues around racism and bullying and different sort of ones that come to us. So where do we refer?
So any concern that a parent would have should speak to their child's teacher first. That's a good place to start. Have that conversation, and if the conversation needs to proceed to either a school administrator or counselor, we have I would say those processes in place, and hopefully it can be resolved within the school. But if the district diversity teacher needs to be contacted, they're available as well. But I would say start with the school, the classroom teacher, administrator, and hopefully it can be resolved there.
Thank you. Trustee Fraser?
Thank you. My question was answered already.
Darren?
Thank you. And our members appreciate the Pro-D and resources available to address racism on an ongoing basis. I have a couple of questions. The first is about the booklet questions and answers for school community members responding to racism, hate, and discrimination. I'm wondering if the VESTA rep on the diversity committee will be able to bring feedback on that booklet at a future meeting.
Absolutely. That's why it's still in draft. So we look forward to their input. Yeah.
And for the anti-racism school lead, I was just looking at some of the bullets, and is this also sort of in a draft stage?
It's sort of looking at a prototype right now, but I know that our union reps on our committee are giving feedback in terms of what's the best way to go about this. We've got the SOGI model, but having the anti-racism lead, do we follow the exact model or is it a different way? So it's being discussed, and hopefully we can come to some type of try a pilot of it, for next year and see how that works.
Yeah, I guess my question would be then, would there be additional support provided to that anti-racism school lead to do some of these things? For example, supporting families, staff, and students, or presenting to staff meetings or parent advisory councils. Do you envision some kind of additional training provided for those teachers?
That's a great question. I think trying to build as much capacity within the scope that we have is what we want to do. So at this time, we have a district teacher lead. Perhaps there might be, I think I've heard, a potential second teacher next year. I'm not sure in this role to help build this capacity, but definitely training opportunities and communication to our schools around this topic is very important. So we want to be very proactive and doing it in a systemic way that meets the communication can get out there to all of our schools.
Thank you. I've got student trustee Pangilian.
Thank you. I understand that the Diversity Advocacy Committee is working to educate and train staff and students on addressing topics of human rights and discrimination. And I was just wondering what types of strategies, initiatives, or otherwise was being taught or trained with staff and students.
Okay. So great question. So in the report, I highlighted some of the different names of the programs that are accessible to our schools, and they're available for students and for staff. And those are, so for example, the speaking rights, that's available for youth. The displacement program, also youth are involved. So these are some of the highlighted programs that I've mentioned right now that are available for our schools, and they're there if schools would like to use them for students as well too.
I was also wondering, because there was 2 incidences in this year that dealt with 2 secondary schools experiencing hateful, discriminatory, experienced incidences in their schools. And I was wondering if any of the training provided to teachers and staff would be about addressing topics like immediately within the time that that incident happened, because I consulted with the 2 secondary schools who have experienced hateful and discriminatory incidences within this year, and both have done things, student-led initiatives to address the topic immediately to kind of help the school around why it was wrong and stuff like that. But they also expressed the need for more admin and teacher support. I understand like the importance of integrating it into the curriculum, and that's fantastic. But the issues that I heard from these students were around the immediate action around the issue when it pops up. So I was just wondering if that was planned for. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I maybe would be able to respond to specific school incidents, but I think any incidents that are brought to the attention of the district and staff, we want to work to resolve and support and try to ensure that those who are impacted by events or situations like this are supported as well as possible. And it's something that we know that we have to improve and work on and provide resources. So I think that what you're asking, we're doing right now everything that we can to do our best so situations like that don't happen again. But unfortunately, we need to, I think, provide as much support and education. It's not, I would say, just a student issue. It's something that, you know, in our society and in the world we live in, that it's a human issue that we all have to work to address. And we don't just want to look at just one like staff or just students, it's everyone. So that's why we're trying to be very intentional about how to support everyone in a system, which we're all in.
Thank you. I've got Trustee Chan Pedley.
Thank you. My question was already answered.
Thank you so much, Selma. Obviously, there's a lot of passion on so many topics. I really appreciate your time. Thank you. So next, we'll welcome Jody Lengua back, Associate Superintendent on a Diversity Committee letter.
Thank you. In your package, you'll see that there is a report on a diversity committee letter, and it's regarding diversity committee response to March 4th board motion. And I'm going to pass it over to Trustee Wong and ask him to open it for discussion.
Chairperson, yeah, I'm the trustee representative on the committee, and the committee passed a motion to mutually agreed on sending this to the board with regards to the motion that was passed at the board meeting on March the 4th with regards to the anti-racism position. So maybe safest if I read it out to everyone. Please accept this letter as our response to the motion passed at the March 4th, 2019 board meeting, stating that the Vancouver Board of Education reaffirms its commitment to eliminating racism. Furthermore, the board supports the development, implementation, and evaluation of procedures, programs, and services that promote and support the principles of anti-racism education, and the Vancouver School Board reestablish and hire an anti-racism position as per the upcoming budget process. The Diversity Committee fully endorses and is appreciative to see additional support being allocated to further address the complexities and diversity found within our school community. We are pleased that the proposed position will expand the diversity district resource teacher team. The Diversity Committee strongly feels that there is significant benefit in having an additional position that is focused on all issues of diversity through a lens of intersectionality. As such, the Diversity Committee is concerned with the board motion as written, as it names the position to be exclusively addressing anti-racism. The committee is also concerned that the decision was made without following any of the existing processes or consultation with regards to the budget process. In support of the multifaceted needs of students and staff, the Diversity Committee formally requests that the board reconsider the specificity in the wording of the motion, implying that the position solely focuses on anti-racism education. We recommend that the proposed position be titled Diversity Resource Teacher Anti-Racism. The Diversity Committee also respectfully asks that the position mirror the existing role, the current role, of the Diversity District Resource Teacher already in existence. For clarity, we would alter the title of the position to Diversity Resource Teacher SOGI. So that's the two positions. It is our vision that the two people in the positions would work in collaboration together in all matters of our diversity. And that's thank you from the District Advisory Diversity Committee. As we're all aware that the budget process is still ongoing at this point, and the title is within the recommendations. There is it's listed as anti-racism, but there's also the point of like diversity. So the committee just wanted the clarification with regards to the title, understanding that there is a focus. If it passes and goes through the budget process, which I believe it is because it's already supported by the board, that there would be at the end, how it would look would be diversity teacher and then anti-racism and SOGI. So the hopes were that these two positions work collectively together. So as a team, rather than one is off doing something or another. So there's importance and strength with regards to the team to help each other out. This has been discussed, I think, in the whole year with regards to the diversity committee. The diversity committee basically stated in 3 or 4 successive meetings that the hopes were that we do not work in silos and there's an intersectionality approach to this. With regards to this motion, I wasn't a participant in it. I was observing, and this came sold strictly from the committee itself. I was there basically providing objective information, how it was passed at the board and how this was going forward. And if we needed information from the diversity committee could share that and we can bring it back to the board for further discussion. A number of committee members spoke with regards to this issue, that it was a social justice issue, then the positions should be a social justice profile. And there was a requiring a degree of expertise in each field, with whether it be SOGI, whether it be anti-racism, but they wanted the two positions to be working together. Each individuals for each position that can handle different forms of oppression, and that was discussed at the committee and it discussed tonight as well. A number of times the whole discussion with regards to collaboration, intersectionality, and worries of silos before this even came to the board as a motion. So earlier in the school year, the whole issue with regards to silos, even before it even came to the board as a motion. There was hopes that we would count, that the board, the district, the committee would count on both people working together. So some members said if one wasn't there or one needed support with regard to any forms of oppression, that the other person would be there. So that's why the thoughts with regards to the focus is diversity, district resource teacher, and then the subtitle, SOGI or anti-racism. So just clarification and request from the committee to the board, which is coming through the committee tonight.
Super. Thank you, Trustee Wong, on behalf of the Diversity Committee. Any questions, comments from the committee? Yeah, I've got Trustee Fraser.
Thank you, Trustee Wong, and I think this is an opportunity to thank the Diversity Committee. I know Selma works with them too. What I'm hearing tonight and what I hear in other ways as well is that they're very engaged group of people who spend a lot of time working with many of them are within our district. There are stakeholder representatives, so they go back to their stakeholder groups. I know there's a lot of discussions happening there, a lot of thoughtful discussions, so that they can bring forward the perspective of their employee group or the students or the parents. So as a trustee, I want to be respectful of the collective work of those people on the committee who are representing all of the VSB stakeholders. And I think the suggestion that's coming forward really meshes well with the motion passed by the board. The motion passed by the board said an anti-racism position And I think, you know, the diversity committee has taken the opportunity to offer clarity to us as a board about how that would work. And I appreciate the long-term ongoing discussions about not having people work in silos. And I think this is a thoughtful way to address that situation.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Darren?
In the past, there was a separate anti-racism committee and a pride committee, and I guess then they were merged to make the diversity committee. And I know we had concerns about it reducing the amount of representation of our members in terms of on the committees. We'd have one less representative, and also the sort of the opportunities to discuss those topics. So I'm just wondering if, you know, adding the anti-racism, the diversity anti-racism mentor to that committee, if they plan on perhaps increasing the frequency of meetings, like more often on a more regular basis to address the issues.
Thank you. I'm the trustee representative. I can bring that back to the committee. I can't speak on behalf of the committee at this stage, but it's an important point. However, I would like to share that the at a number of the committees, the discussion with regards to working in silos, that there was a unanimous view that there should be everyone working together. Whether a requirement of more meetings, that I can ask that. However, to be clear, the current diversity resource teacher has been doing anti-racism, all forms of diversity, anti-racism and anti-homophobia as well. And to be quite open, I think there was a frustration amongst the committee members with regards to that. You know, there was the comments with regards to anti-racism. There has been a lot being done by the diversity resource teacher, and there has, you know, unanimous support amongst the committee members with regards to that. I mean, they're very happy with regards to the motion that was passed by the board. But with regards to more meetings, there could be, you know, expanded discussions. But the current diversity resource teacher has been doing a superb job with regards to the diversity toolkit, with regards to bringing all the committee members, all the community members together to discuss both anti-racism and anti-homophobia.
Thanks, Darren. Follow up, and then myself, and then Trustee Cho.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate how you explained earlier how you envisioned sort of the collaborative, the way the two would work collaboratively and the importance of that. And, you know, on our own social justice committee, which is a much larger umbrella, we also moved to the umbrella model of merging our committees together for the last few years. And we see some challenges around that model, and we're looking at our own models and investigating that to see how effective they are and what kind of weaknesses have emerged from that. But I really appreciate the explanation about how they'll work collaboratively.
One last point is a number of committee members, there's a lot of young committee members on the committee, but amongst a few of the old timers that lived through the incarnations or how it was structured in the past, those that were involved in you know, the anti-racism and the at the time, as Darren stated, with the Pride Committee, there were a number of occasions where the two groups merged together and had that discussion, and they found it very important. A lot of information was shared. So of those members that are currently on the committee, from way back, I think they dropped off and came back. Those were the ones that were strongest in voicing the importance of not working in silos, and this was an issue with regards to social justice profile and people working together, and to be able to support each other rather than the one's working here, but jointly working together.
Okay, I've got Trustee Parrott.
Thank you, Chair. I gotta stop being antsy when I am listening to discussions that are deja vu all over again. That's a Yogi Berra phrase, by the way, deja vu all over again. Of course, I'm one of those oldies. That's ageism, you know. One of those oldies that was around when the BCTF went the umbrella route and was absolutely opposed to it at that time. But you know, I'm older now, and I'm gentler, and I suppose I'm more willing to listen to diverse opinions. But this is where I am. But I know that I need to do a lot more investigation about my position. You talk about silos, and that, you know, that's a new term to me. So as is intersectional. I mean, those are new terms to this old person here. So I've got to do some more investigation on those too. But you know, we look. I think, not we. I don't know about other people. I do look at things, I guess, from a siloistic point of view, because that's, and maybe that's wrong, maybe I shouldn't, but you know, I haven't been affected by racism. I can't express what it's like to be affected by racism, but I have been affected by sexism, and I can certainly speak from my point of view about sexism. So if that might put me in a silo, a gender sexism silo, and leave me out of the racism silo. But when we're separate like that, it doesn't stop collaboration. You know, to say we want to collab, of course we do. We all want to be able to understand each other's needs and each other's understanding and each other's experiences. We have to do that, otherwise we're not going to go forward. But I think that it is fair to acknowledge that we come to these issues from different points of view, from different places, and so you know, that's one way for me to acknowledge those different places. And I think when we're talking about the sorts of behaviors that have been exhibited in the country and in the city and in the world, dealing with the way we behave towards Indigenous people, the way we behave towards people of color, I think we have to call that what it is, and we have to be really specific about that kind of behavior, which is not acceptable. And I think perhaps we can do that better if we have a focus of that particular behavior. Again, I need to clarify my thinking around all of this, but it seems to me that that when we name it anti-race, when we name it racist behavior, we're being clearer than saying that's anti-diversity behavior. Or I mean, I think we're being really clear about what we mean about that behavior. Those are just my thoughts now.
So I've got a question and comment as well. Thank you so much for the passion that goes towards subjects like this, because this is the difference between kids showing up to school and not, or educators showing up to teach and not. So I really feel strongly and passionately about it. And as surprise, a woman of color, I can speak a little bit about racism and sexism and the intersectional oppressions that come with that, experiencing it as a kid, as an adult, etc. So I really strongly do think that there's an important reason to have a distinction for the terms of anti-racism, and recognizing that there is something inherently important about naming that so that we know what it is we're targeting, that is very distinctly different from diversity or intersectionality or homophobia or ageism, for example. So yes, I think that comes from a strong place of personal and professional experience and working in the district and knowing how important it is to be able to access services right when you need them as a young person. I'm experiencing this, where do I go? And then you find it really quickly. So yeah, I just wanted to share that and also have a question just around the composition of the diversity committee. If you could just speak a little bit about the composition in terms of maybe Black, Indigenous, or people of color that identify as that.
Chairperson, as a member, I'll leave that for the committee chair. With regards to Trustee Parrott's comments with regards to silos and intersectionality, and the chair of the committee's comments with regard, we're all supportive. We're all in the same boat with regards to naming it. If it's racism, we name it as racism. I think everyone is very clear with regard to that, and the committee would be very clear with it. With regards to an expert on the position, we're very clear on that as well. And the title would be anti-racism, and the title would be SOGI, anti-homophobia. But to connect the two as supportive groups together, that it starts with, and what the current title is the diversity resource teacher. So there's a focus, is anti-racism, but bottom line is we want a strong team that works together. But it is anti-racism and SOGI. There is a specific thing. Now, the term is, we're not saying to completely separate them in silos or combine them all together. It's just that we have to be very clear that we want two people to be working together. And the title is very clear how it's written in the letter to the board. So the request is diversity resource teacher, anti-racism. Diversity resource teacher, SOGI, so they can work together and how it is.
Thank you. And just to make a note on the agenda here, our last item was discussion items, which is the anti-racism committee. So just want to note that we're getting into that topic. And I've got Trustee Cho.
Thank you through the chair. I just wanted to make a quick comment that I don't think that the suggestion of this additional role in any way diminishes the role that the district resource teacher had played or the quality of the work that that person had put in. I think it's more a reflection of the quantity of work and the issues that we are seeing emerging in our district, and understanding that we do need to target resources there. So we have a multitude of people who need support, and that's where the motion came from, not in any way diminishing the work that the person who had that role was doing.
Thank you, Trustee Cho. And I could just add that there is a meeting scheduled to address said concerns. It was canceled last week, but that will be happening shortly, and then we can revisit the conversation shortly after that's taken place. So other questions or comments? Thinking about the anti-racism committee, did anyone want to add to that discussion?
Chairperson,
Trustee Free.
I think we're still on the agenda item of the letter, so I think it appears to me that there seems to be general support to use these terms in the or these titles in the additional position that's coming forward in the budget. So I think if the committee could give direction on that, and then we've already sort of stepped right into the committee discussion, but maybe we could finish this piece on the agenda before we move on to the next.
Sure. Thanks, Trustee Fraser. So I think that the letter can be taken as advisement to the board as a part of the reporting process back from the committee, where we can discuss it further. Works.
Given that this is a position that's listed in the budget, however it goes back to the budget, and if there's support by the committee and support to the board, that it's very specific. I think it's very close to how it's titled in the budget documents at this stage already. Yeah, so.
Thank you. Thanks. So thank you, Trustee Fraser. So that officially ends the item on diversity committee letter so that we can speak more in depth about the anti-racism committee. So this was brought up as a discussion item, I believe, 4 student learning and wellbeing committee meetings ago, and we've been having ongoing conversations. So just checking in light of the conversations we've been having today, so many that are obviously related to the topic of anti-racism advisory or committee. So any comments or thoughts on that topic to date that we'd like to share today? Trustee Fraser?
I'd like to pick up on the comment from Darren about the way that Vesto's been handling its diversity committee, and they're going back to have some thoughtful conversations about what's worked well and what's presenting challenges. And I think with an additional position coming forward, this is probably a good opportunity for our diversity committee to have that thoughtful internal discussion about how they feel that this would best be handled. These are the people who step forward from within our district on behalf of their stakeholder groups, willing to take on these issues, willing to go back to their communities or their stakeholder communities to speak on behalf of all their members. And I think that these are the people who would be best to lead that discussion, knowing their experience with handling issues, knowing their experience on the committee, discussing these issues.
Got Trustee Wong.
Chairperson, I can bring that to the diversity committee. If I can get a little more information with regards to, because I just have it as a title here. I have some thoughts of how, but I don't want to prejudice the discussion. But as I stated, there were discussions going on in the last 3 or 4 committee meetings already. But I'll bring it to the advisory committee. But I would appreciate if there was a little more of a descriptor rather than a title, so I can bring that to the committee.
Thank you so much, Trustee Wong. So I could add a little bit of context, perhaps. So as a staff person in the district, I remember that the position, the anti-racism position, was in existence. So we could perhaps look at what that role entailed, which also included sitting on the advisory that at the time included folks from the community, individuals, organizations, students, parents. There was a broad representation of individuals who self-identified as Black, Indigenous, people of color, queer. Yeah, it was pretty wide ranging and large and fluctuating depending on what the needs were. So if that helps with some of the context, and I do think that the new position of the anti-racism position will help guide what that structure might look like. Go ahead, Trustee Wong.
I was just looking for something more written. I can share that, but if you have something more written, I can bring that as well, and just have that discussion with the committee.
Final questions, comments? All good? All right, so that brings us to the end of the Student Learning and Wellbeing Committee meeting. Thank you, everyone. We're adjourning now at 8:55. Thank you.